Hey everyone, and welcome back to the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Samuel Harrison,
And I'm Olivia Harper.
and we're excited to have you join us for another deep dive into the world of blood pressure. We talk a lot about the usual suspects: diet, exercise, medication, the things we think about when we think about blood pressure. But today, we're diving into something a little different.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's on the agenda today?
Well, we're going to explore the potential link between chewing gum, stress reduction, and how that might indirectly affect blood pressure.
Chewing gum. Seriously.
I know it sounds a little out there, but there's actually some interesting research on this.
Yeah.
For example, a study published in PLOS1 found that chewing gum can actually change how our brains process stress. They exposed participants to loud noise as a stressor and had some chew gum while others didn't.
So they basically put people in a stressful situation and handed them a stick of gum to see what happened.
Exactly. And they found that the gum chewers reported feeling less stressed compared to the non-chewers.
Okay, but was it just a feeling, or did they actually measure any physiological changes?
That's the really cool part. They used brain imaging and found that chewing gum actually reduced the activity in specific brain areas associated with stress processing.
Hold on. You're saying chewing gum can actually change how our brains respond to stress? Which brain areas are we talking about here?
Well, one key area is the anterior insula, or AI for short. This area is involved in a whole bunch of things, including how we experience emotions and bodily sensations. It's like the alarm system of the brain, telling us when something feels wrong.
So if chewing gum can calm down the AI, that could explain why people feel less stressed.
Right. And they also looked at the connection between the AI and another brain region called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or DACC. The DACC is like the command center, trying to figure out how to respond to the stressor.
So how did chewing gum affect that connection?
The study suggests that chewing gum actually weakened the connection between these two areas.
Weakened. I would have thought you'd want those areas talking to each other more during stress.
You might think so, but when we're stressed, the connection between the AI and DACC tends to get really strong as our brain tries to process the threat. This can sometimes lead to feeling overwhelmed and anxious.
So it's like chewing gum is helping to prevent our stress response from going haywire.
That's a great way to put it. It's like chewing gum is telling the DACC, hey, calm down a bit, we got this.
Now I know what you're thinking. This is all fascinating, but does it actually translate to lower blood pressure?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This particular study focused on how chewing gum affects the brain's response to stress, but they didn't directly measure blood pressure.
So while it seems like chewing gum might help reduce the feeling of stress, we can't definitively say it lowers blood pressure based on this study alone.
Right, but that doesn't mean there's no connection. Another study published in Springerlich found that chewing gum can influence activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in emotional regulation and impulse control.
So maybe chewing gum is giving us a little extra boost of self-control when stress is trying to take over?
Exactly. And if we can manage our stress more effectively, that could have indirect benefits for our blood pressure.
Now, to be fair, we do need more research on the direct link between chewing gum and blood pressure. There was a study done at Mines, Wisconsin, specifically investigating this.
Okay, drum roll, please. Did chewing gum send blood pressure plummeting?
Well, not quite. Their findings suggest that while chewing gum might not directly lower blood pressure readings, it could still play a role in how we perceive and manage stress.
So it's less about gum being some magic blood pressure cure-all and more about its potential to help us navigate stressful situations more effectively.
That's a great way to summarize it. You know, one thing that really struck me about those studies we discussed is how chewing gum seems to affect the prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain is like our inner control center, helping us make decisions, regulate emotions, stay cool under pressure.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It seems like chewing gum might give us a little extra boost from the prefrontal cortex, helping us tap into those self-control resources when stress is trying to take over.
That makes a lot of sense. Think about those moments when you're feeling totally overwhelmed, like you're about to lose it. Maybe your heart's racing, your thoughts are spiraling.
Oh, I've definitely been there. Not a fun place to be.
But imagine if you had this little tool, this simple act of chewing gum that could help you engage your prefrontal cortex and say, hang on a second. Let's take a breath. Let's think this through.
It's almost like giving your brain a moment to reset and regain control.
Exactly. Now, I know some of our listeners might be thinking, okay, this all sounds interesting, but how much gum do I need to chew? What kind of gum is best?
Those are great questions. And unfortunately, the research isn't quite there yet to give us those definitive answers. We need more studies looking at things like the ideal dosage of gum, how long to chew for, and whether different flavors have different effects.
So for now, it's a bit of a personal experiment.
Exactly. If you're curious about trying this out, I'd say pay attention to how you feel when you chew gum in different situations. Does it help you feel calmer, more focused, better able to handle those everyday stressors?
It's all about finding what works for you. And of course, chewing gum is just one small piece of the puzzle when it comes to managing stress and blood pressure.
Absolutely. It's not a replacement for healthy lifestyle choices, regular exercise, or any medications your doctor might have prescribed.
But it could be a helpful tool to add to your stress management toolkit.
Exactly. Speaking of tools, I want to shift gears for a moment
Mhm.
and talk about another fascinating aspect of blood pressure management that often gets overlooked.
Oh, I'm all ears. What is it?
Well, we've been talking a lot about the physical and psychological aspects of blood pressure. But what about the social side of things? Our relationships and social connections play a huge role in our overall well-being. And there's growing evidence that they can impact our cardiovascular health, including our blood pressure.
So you're saying our social lives could actually affect our blood pressure?
That's right. Think about it. Strong social connections can provide support, reduce stress, and boost our mood, all of which can have positive effects on our physical health.
But on the flip side, feeling lonely or isolated could actually increase our risk of developing high blood pressure.
Exactly. It's not quite as simple as saying, lonely people have high blood pressure, but studies have shown a correlation between social isolation and an increased risk of developing cardiovascular problems.
So if I'm trying to manage my blood pressure, I shouldn't just focus on what I eat and how much I exercise. I should also pay attention to my social life.
That's a really important takeaway. It's all about taking a holistic view of our health, recognizing that our physical well-being is deeply intertwined with our mental and social well-being.
This reminds me of that study we discussed earlier, the one from PLOS1, where they had people chew gum while listening to loud noises.
The one where they measured the participants' skin conductance levels.
Exactly. They found that the gum chewers not only reported feeling less stressed, but their skin conductance levels were also lower, indicating a physiological reduction in stress response.
So we're seeing converging evidence here, both from subjective reports and objective physiological measures, suggesting that chewing gum can actually modulate our stress response.
And to bring this back to our discussion about social connections, imagine how this effect might play out in a real-world social situation. Let's say you're heading into a big meeting at work, and you're feeling a bit anxious.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. My palms are already starting to sweat just thinking about it.
Well, in that scenario, chewing gum could potentially help you regulate your stress response. So you go into that meeting feeling calmer and more composed, which could then lead to a more positive social interaction.
And prevent that meeting from turning into a blood pressure nightmare.
Exactly. It's all connected. Chewing gum, stress, social connections, they all influence each other in complex ways.
It's a good reminder that our bodies are amazing, interconnected systems.
And that even seemingly small things like chewing a piece of gum can have ripple effects on our overall health.
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But we're not done yet. We've got one more part to this deep dive where we'll wrap things up and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder. Stay tuned. As we wrap up this deep dive, I wanted to touch on something we haven't explicitly addressed yet. The placebo effect.
Yes. The power of belief.
Exactly. Because let's be honest, some people might be skeptical about this whole chewing gum thing. They might think, come on, it's just gum. How could that possibly affect my blood pressure?
And you know what? There might be some truth to that skepticism. The placebo effect is a very real phenomenon, and it's likely playing a role in some of the studies we've discussed.
So are you saying the benefits of chewing gum might be all in our heads?
Not necessarily all, but the mind-body connection is incredibly powerful. If someone believes that chewing gum will help them relax and lower their blood pressure, there's a good chance it actually will, at least to some extent.
That's pretty amazing. Our beliefs can actually influence our physiology.
Absolutely. And this isn't just limited to chewing gum. The placebo effect has been observed in a wide range of health contexts, from pain management to depression.
So how do we make sense of this in terms of chewing gum and blood pressure? Does it even matter if the benefits are partly due to the placebo effect?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is no. It doesn't necessarily matter. If something helps people feel better and manage their stress, even if it's partly through the power of suggestion. Isn't that a good thing?
I think so. It's not about dismissing the placebo effect as fake, but rather recognizing it as a legitimate part of the healing process.
Exactly. And remember, even if the placebo effect is at play, it's still triggering real physiological changes in the body. It's not just some imaginary benefit.
So for our listeners who are curious about trying out chewing gum as a stress management tool, I think the key takeaway is to go into it with an open mind.
Be willing to experiment. Pay attention to how you feel. And don't discount the possibility that your beliefs can influence the outcome.
And if you find that chewing gum helps you feel calmer, more focused, or better able to handle stress, then great, add it to your toolkit.
Absolutely. But as always, it's important to consult with your doctor about any concerns related to your blood pressure.
They can provide personalized guidance and make sure you're taking the right steps for your individual health needs.
Well, I think we thoroughly chewed over this topic today. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive into the world of blood pressure. I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
And you've been listening to the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with anyone who might benefit from this information. Until next time, stay curious and keep those blood vessels happy.